All right, let's drop into the New South Wales, the Victorian election with Sky News Melbourne reporter Julia Bradley, who's been out on the hustings, getting around, listening to all the spin. You're probably drowning in it, Julia. More polls today. They are tightening, aren't they? And people on the ground are reporting at polling booths. I've heard this on Talkback Radio. It's been fed into me that the Premier, not so much Labor, but the Premier is a real drag on the vote. What can you tell us?
Well, Peter, we are hearing that. So we've been hearing from a number of different polls that the gap between the Coalition and Labor is certainly tightening. So, of course, we had that Redbridge poll that was done earlier in the week, commissioned by the Herald Sun, suggestions that the primary vote between Labor and the Coalition, when undecided votes are redistributed, the suggestion is that the primary vote for both parties could be a lot closer, both sitting at about 38%. Even though Labor remains ahead when it comes to two-party preferred, the Coalition is up 3%. So it does point to a Labor win at this stage, but it does look like that gap's tightening. We've also seen some polling that was done by 3AW. According to a leaked Labor poll, there are suggestions that the seat of Werribee, which is held by Victoria's Treasurer Tim Pallas, could really be under threat for the government. Other seats as well, Albert Park, Point Cook, other seats that could also fall.
All right, what's the opposition leader been up to today? What's the Premier been up to?
So Victoria's opposition leader, Matthew Guy, he was out today in one of the Liberal Party's more marginal seats, the seat of Sandringham. He was out spruiking this manufacture locally plan that the opposition have announced. They've set aside about $2.5 billion to really promote local manufacturing here in Victoria. One part is all about giving local manufacturers that recognition, so a logo that suggests that that's what they do. Another part is really encouraging governments to procure locally rather than interstate or overseas. Also, we saw the government today really talking about health again, women's health in particular, announcing a package for women's health at the Royal Melbourne Hospital, the Royal Women's Hospital that is, and they were announcing a $71 million package for women's health, all about increasing treatments, the amount of operations for people with endometriosis and for associated conditions. So quite different days on the campaign trail for both Labor and for the Coalition, but that central theme of health, of cost of living, of manufacturing, all really shining through today.
I'm just writing myself a note to come back and tell my audience something about women in just a moment and the tactics that are being played out right now. Talk to me about the Greens. I'm interested in this growing talk that there's going to be, or a likelihood of, a Labor-Greens minority government. The Greens leader, Samantha Ratnam's got a whole host of demands. She says if they're in that negotiating position she wants from the Premier. What are they, Julia?
So the polls today, Peter, as you've been saying, really pointing to the possibility of Labor not being able to form majority government. So in response today, the Greens here in Victoria coming out with this list of demands or priorities, as they say, that they'd want a party to really commit to if they were to, say, form some kind of agreement, a preference deal in the event of a hung parliament. Top of that list from the Greens, a desire to ban onshore and offshore gas exploration in Victoria, capping rent increases in line with wages, passing the Greens' strengthening integrity bill, raising the age of criminal responsibility to 14 is one of those points, and also ending native forest logging across the state in 2023. That top point, really an interesting one, Peter, about a desire to ban onshore and offshore gas exploration, something that the Coalition has said that they're really against.
And what about this issue in Hawthorn with an environmental group that's anything but as independent as it claims to be?
So this is revelations that a Greens member who has been campaigning quite heavily in the hotly contested electorate of Hawthorn has advocated, has authorised this environmental scorecard, if you like, a climate scorecard that's come out, a community-based scorecard that actually ranks his party at the top of that list on environmental credentials compared with other candidates that are running in that seat. So Labor's hit out at this Greens member by the name of Benjamin Cressler, suggesting that he really should have declared that he's a member of the Greens before having anything to do with this scorecard, suggesting this is just the Greens patting themselves on the back in order to win votes. Labor really been on the attack about this, but the community group that put this forward, the Kooyong Climate Alliance, has a number of members from different organisations, different parties. One member as well as a member of the Labor Party. So the Greens have been hitting back and saying that this really is just cheap politics, stupid politics for Labor to be on the attack about this.
All right, it'll get worse from here on in as we get tighter and tighter down to polling day. I'll come back tomorrow night too and discuss with you, Julia, this Stop Daniel Andrews party. There's an interesting backstory there, but we'll do that tomorrow night.